Hello everyone. So this is Deniz Beser
Uh,
from Fanzineist Vienna. Today we have a small panel with Adnan Mahmutovic, Levent, and Zeynep Beler from Mangal Media team. So the main topic of this panel is nostalgia in the periphery. And nostalgia in the periphery is limited edition bundle of serigraphy and digital prints from a diverse range of writers and artists who investigate the golden age of global popular culture from the perspective of those who have been left outside. The personal essays and short stories in the project ask discomforting questions about who gets to remember and who gets to be forgotten. And also, I would like to give some small informations about Mangal Media before starting to our conversation. So they are a collective of writers, journalists, artists, and scholars from the so-called periphery. They will no longer allow white boys in cafes to steal our stories, their stories, and sell them. And they will no longer work with Becky's as they accumulate wealth and prestige from the comfort of their Starbucks HQ while commanding fixers to run around doing the work for them. So they will no longer stand by as their designs are plundered for use in high-end fashion as their music is appropriate and their designs are plundered for use in high-end fashion as their music is repacked and as their culinary habits are discovered and sanitized by self-described cultural pioneers. So, welcome again to this meeting and at Fanzineist Vienna. It's really nice to see you all in this panel. And yeah, first of all, I would like to hear the story of Mangal Media from you. When and how did you start to this project, and how was your motivation in the beginning of this project?
we've started Mangal Media in 2016. It's been something that we were talking about before also, but we really launched it in 2016. It happened because in 2014, 2015, the connection all right? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, right now you came back.
Broke up a little bit.
So 2014, 2015, I was living in Istanbul and still am. At the time, it was kind of like a meeting point for a lot of revolutionaries who were coming from like the general Middle Eastern region. A lot of people, like after the Egyptian revolution failed because of the coup, then after the Syrian revolution, kind of like the tide had turned again from like Tunisia and people from like the wider region also, like a lot of people who had emigrated to the United States from places like Afghanistan or the Middle East who were kind of like lost about like they didn't want to go back to their original country, but they were having difficulties living in the United States as well. So we kind of like we started meeting each other, and we realized, especially with kind of like emigres from the Arab Spring, we realized that like a lot of the times, like when journalists come to our country, they write these like stories and like news stories about us, and they get published and they get the money and the prestige about our stories that we should have had. And at the time, I was an anthropologist as well, although like I did not work with newspaper journalism. I was working in academia, and I was realizing that like very similar things are happening there also. So I've decided, well, we've collectively decided that we don't want to put up with this no more. And in 2016, that was the year when the coup happened in Turkey as well. And that was the time that a lot of us had reached some kind of like a breaking point about the news coverage of the coup. And we've decided that like this is the time to start it now. And that was the first article that I had written.
Yeah, thank you, Efe. It was a nice introduction. Also, Adnan, I would like to hear from you. Can you just tell about yourself? As I know, you are a writer who is living in Sweden. right?
Indeed, yes. I have basically I've lived in Sweden since 1993. I was born in Bosnia in the 70s and came here as a refugee of war. During the 90s. Um, so basically, I've finished all my higher education here and started writing. So I'm a professor of English literature at Stockholm University and also a writer, and I also teach creative writing. So I have this kind of double capacity of I'm dabbling in the academia and the the writing life at the same time. So this kind of schizophrenic way of being.
Yeah, I got it. And also, how did you meet with Mangal Media? What's the story of that meeting?
It was fate, obviously. Yes. So basically, what happened was that I was in 2019. I was one of the organizers of the protests against the Nobel Prize to Peter Handke, the genocide denier. So I was really active everywhere. I was in touch with a lot of journalists, interviews. I was, with this team of enthusiasts and activists. We were writing, we were pulling together this protest that we wanted to have on the day of when the Nobel Prize was given. One of the best things of all that, I mean, despite all the nasty shit that happened around that and the very unfortunate event of him receiving that prize, was that a lot of us connected, and so we found each other. People who were active all over the world. So somehow we got connected. And one of those who wrote a really good, extensive analysis of the entire affair and tried to kind of collect us all was working for Mangal Media, and his article was published in Mangal Media. So I was really a big fan of that, and I discovered Mangal Media through that article. Really, I was not aware of it before that. So when I wrote an article called "Black Noses Matters," I was looking for. It was kind of an experimental piece, so kind of a piece that crossed borders of many genres. So I was looking for the right venue, and I thought Mangal Media was probably the best. It just seemed to be the right place, and it turned out to be the best place, really. So that's how we started working. Yeah.
Thanks for all this information. And Zeynep Beler is with us. Zeynep is an artist and painter from Istanbul, Turkey. And also she makes artist books too. And also you make some zines, right, Zeynep? You have several kind of zines.
I have.
As a publication, let's say.
I think so. I think I always try to make printed material along with whatever show or public space thing. I'm always, even if it's like a photocopied thing, I'm always trying to have that. So yeah, you could say zines.
And also you were part of this project, Nostalgia, in the Periphery publication. So you made several print works, I guess. So what's the story of it?
So basically, the works would have in this collection of art zines, I guess they would have. If I can correct me if I'm wrong, but they would have a visual component and like a written component, and sometimes the writer and the visual artist or the illustrator or whatever would be linked up. But in my case, I did them both. I wrote a short story and then I kind of did a little illustration to go with it. And then Ayşegül, who was basically in charge of like producing these limited edition zines in a kind of with screen printing. That's
and she's living in Berlin.
Berlin, yeah. And she has her practice there. So we would do the designing, and she produced them. She screen printed them. in Big Baboli in Istanbul. So yeah, in my case, it was just a short story. And this was also kind of new for me because I have done these limited edition zines to accompany something else that I was doing, but not through such artisan means, like not like screen printed or even like Riso. You know, I've always wanted to do that, so it was really nice.
Yeah, it's quite nice to see this kind of collectives in Turkey. So I hope day by day there is going to be more collectives who works on artist books and zines more and more. This would be a great approach for the artists and the collectives in the future. So I would like to talk about in nostalgia periphery. For example, when we check out the meaning of that nostalgia, we directly go to some Greek meaning. I mean, it means like coming back to home with sadness, kind of. So in your production, is there some sadness in that way? So what kind of feelings do they have as a publication and print?
We haven't really kind of explored the full meaning of the word nostalgia. Instead, we kind of wanted to concentrate on a very specific kind of nostalgia. That was kind of nostalgia that is felt by the people that we identify as being in the periphery. By that, we mean like people who are not kind of like living in the global West, like either the United States or like North America or like Europe. And especially for like a certain kind of generation, I suppose like Adnan might be more like an early Gen X, while me, Zeynep, and pretty much the rest of the everyone who was involved were kind of like late millennials, like older end of millennials. So we were kind of like into this idea of we are kind of like really familiarized with this kind of like Western popular culture. We grew up at its peak, and our sense of self and our sense of past is like deeply intertwined with this idea of the kind of like culture that we have consumed at that time, and we kind of miss it, and it's kind of like ingrained in our like memory to miss that. And our primary concern with nostalgia in the periphery was this idea of like, what does it mean to miss something that doesn't belong to you? What does it mean to miss something who does not even know that you exist?
Yeah, I totally understand. And Adnan, what do you want to add about this topic?
Yeah, I think Efe is right. Although I would say, you know, I easily transfer from Gen X to the millennials to the next and the next. So I just skip like a skipping stone. I think I claim all of the. I came to be all these generations, if I may, you know. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
sorry for pinning you into a
no
generation.
worries, no worries at all. I'm just yeah. I tend to kind of metamorphose and just kind of be in the next generation. So now I'm like in my 20s. But yes, definitely. I think F is right. The one thing that became really clear from the beginning was that that nostalgia in the periphery for us as peripherals was very much connected to popular culture, the consumption of popular culture that we grew up with, and how that kind of remains this anchor in time. So of course it's different things, entirely different things, but there is a kind of an uncanny similarity between the things that pulled us and how we relate to those. So for me that was extremely interesting to see that we are from different I like that Efe said that we are from different generations, but this very being a peripheral and the way we relate to the past was uncannily similar. And you may ask yourself, you know, why is that the case? Why is that, you know, how we are shaped? Why do we think of ourselves through similar tropes, similar just ways of being?
Thank you very much, Adnan. And Zeynep, I would like to hear your opinions about this topic too.
About this particular type of nostalgia, in the periphery. Well, this is very interesting for me to explore as well, because of how, like if I said, we're like kind of older millennials, and I am exactly at this age where like everything is recycled, and start to realize how much of this nostalgia you have is actually being manufactured, and this brings with it this sense of questioning your reality, but in like a kind of politically critical way. So it's a bit of a confusing age, and it is cathartic being in this kind of project, you know, basically to think about it, even though I do have, it's like it's so intertwined with your personal identity. There's like a greater part of it, but there's so much more to explore that I wrote this short story about this toy that I remembered from my childhood for nostalgia in the periphery for this like collection. And then I started writing something nostalgic again immediately. Like I started working on an article about some household furniture. And I think this is I think Efe focused on like a very essential part of just being that touches upon everything, like everything current, but also very timeless. So yeah, nostalgia is just very psychodramatic, I would say. It's really good to get into this. It sounds like something simple and basic and like very pure, you know, your childhood and something, but there's a lot to unpack. So and about being in the periphery, it's definitely something different than being in the Central West. Like the nostalgia there is going to differ. So that's like that's an interesting comparative standpoint to look at nostalgia in this way.
Yeah, you are right. When I start to think about the topic of nostalgia, as artists and writers from Turkey, we have many mutual topics about that nostalgia. But when we started to think about artists who are from China or Australia, there is going to be some different type of nostalgia because of their past popular culture and some different kind of images from their childhood time. So yeah, there is maybe some mutual points in about some mainstream movies or some animation, but still somehow each cultures and geographies create their own nostalgia. So what do you think about this, Efe? Somehow you try to make a melting down with different artists from some different countries in a Mangal Media project. So somehow it was like a melting point. So I'm really wondering about what you think about this topic.
I think one of the principal things that kind of like unifies the sentiment in this project has been the idea that like the specific way in which we feel nostalgia in the periphery. Like even though like the specific items that we have consumed like can vary quite massively, we do share the common sense that we have consumed a culture that was essentially not ours, and the people who have produced that culture have like are almost entirely unaware of our culture.
Yeah.
So that was one unifying thing. And the second part I think that I find quite exciting as well, especially although they were not involved in nostalgia for a lot of peripheral people, it always comes with kind of like a sense of guilt, because it always comes with this idea of like people who are obsessing about like how things were better like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago. And for a lot of us, we feel that that sense of nostalgia is kind of like whitewashing the past. And that's been kind of like a really core thing for all of us as well. Like, for example, currently in Turkey, we're dealing with like a massive increase in racism, but like scandalous increase in racism. And a lot of that racism is fueled deeply by the sense that things used to be like so much better 20 years ago, and that things were a lot better like 20 years ago because a lot of the time people believe this kind of stuff because they were young, obviously 20 years ago, And a lot of the places that they were hanging out seemed a lot more exciting to them 20 years ago because they were enjoying it in a way that a 22-year-old would. And now that they're getting old, and there's a lot of people complain about like there being too many Syrians or Afghans or like, in other words, kind of like refugees who are kind of like wandering around in those streets, and they feel that their youth is being taken away from them. And that kind of nostalgia, like almost all of us, from wherever we are in the world, we are worried about that kind of nostalgia. I think we wanted to have like a skeptical approach to nostalgia as opposed to, I was just saying that in Adnan's story, he starts right away with being like extremely skeptical about nostalgia, and he's kind of like he has a sentence about like sailing into the seas of nostalgia and like kind of like not wanting to. He's got a silk screen printed comic book in which he starts immediately off describing skepticism about nostalgia. And I was just saying that Zeynep essentially wrote a general horror story, like a Twilight Zone feeling horror story about the idea of urinals. So like I wanted to say that we were like super skeptical about the idea of nostalgia right from the get-go.
And also, Adnan, I would like to hear this topic from your perspective, because you have a different background. You are from Bosnia, living in Sweden nowadays.
He is right. I mean, we come from the perspective of people being really aware of how nostalgia has been politicized, how it's been manufactured, how it's especially we from the Balkans. I mean, like obviously any country really. I mean, we have this in Sweden as well. And it is usually the top-down discourse. People select a couple of things that you should be nostalgic about, and then they kind of shove it down your throat. When we are supposed to feel certain types of nostalgia where we come from or where we actually live, let's say it's Bosnia or let's say it's in Sweden. So the way we approach this, I feel, is through kind of reclaiming nostalgia or trying to kind of shape it and show some agency and reshape nostalgia in our ways by focusing on things that no one would focus on, perhaps, or nostalgias that are very individual, that come out of the left field really for a lot of people. So some might identify, some might not. We create different resonances, not only these kind of politically sanctioned types of nostalgia, which always, in my view, are meant to be to shape you as an agent of a certain political discourse or cultural discourse. Yeah. So basically, so we see that that what we've tried to do is we are very skeptical of the use of nostalgia, but we're not entirely against nostalgia. So we're kind of reclaiming it and reshaping it in a way.
Yeah, thank you, Adnan, for your opinions. And also, I would like to listen you a bit. Zeynep?
Yeah, I think I was just thinking when Adnan said, also Efe said, like, we are kind of trying to determine or like finding out what nostalgia is ours, I think part of it is also like nostalgia. A lot of it is, it's kind of like this contemporary notion. And like in our case, living in the periphery, it can be imported or manufactured, some sense of it, or you get the sense that it does not, like some of these things that you thought belonged to you did not belong to you. It's interesting to take apart what part of it was not yours and what part of it really is, because there is some like fundamental truth about it. About your situation in the world that tells you where you are by like examining some, I don't know, like knick-knack from your childhood, something you watch. And also, Efe and I are neighbors, and he was talking about how much like racism is on the rise. We can see this so acutely where we live, because there's like a lot of influx of day tourists, right? And everybody's talking about how much like Arabs and how much like Syrians are coming and they like ruin this neighborhood or whatever. And it's just like a lot of Turkish people from like mainland Istanbul just visiting daily. That's the crowd. That's what has changed from before. So it has a lot to do with perception and how much the world has changed, how people weaponize well, I mean, this is the danger for all of us. You can weaponize your sense of nostalgia for how like everything is going wrong with the world. And this is why it's because it's not like my childhood. This is what I see all the time. It's everybody is just like, this sucks because it's not like my childhood. While not realizing that this is so subjective for everybody.
I was just wondering about the working principles of Mangal Media. You make some invitation to the artists and writers, or you just make some open calls, or in between?
A lot of the times, well, it's all of them. We didn't really make any open calls, but we've invited kind of like people to submit articles about nostalgia in the periphery. Sometimes like I meet people and I go directly, like I see somebody's work and I'm like, oh, you should be writing for us. Like, so like I contact them directly. And sometimes people just contact us. They would be like, yeah, we saw your work, or like, for example, Adnan contacted us through another writer who had written for us as well. Yeah, so it's a combination, but most of the times, like I prefer to work with writers and artists on like a long-term basis. Like I like to know who they are and kind of like know the way that they work, and so that I understand their creativity, and as an editor I can respond to it like a lot better than I would with like a total stranger or something.
Yeah. And also, as Mangal Media, you don't only make prints or zines or artist books, you also make some podcasts. You already talk about nostalgia in Periphery in your podcast in Spotify. Also, you had a program together with Zeynep and you, Efe. You were making one of record for your podcast. Also, I was listening that one. It was a really nice one. And I really offer to our followers about your Mangal Media podcast, so they can just find your podcast on Spotify.
We are originally an online platform. Like when we back in 2016, we didn't really think about like publishing any like the kind of way that we write has evolved as well. Like back in 2016, for example, apart from the manifesto that you've read early, like at the opening of the meeting, to us, I mean, like, of course I still stand by it, but to me it's more kind of like a historic document at this stage. Like the platform has come to signify still that to a certain extent, but a lot more than that. It's come to mean something more about like finding out about ourselves. It's almost kind of like taking a psychoanalytical turn about like investing what nostalgia means and like going into our memories and trying to discover who we really are. It's kind of turned into something not just like out of anger and like reacting against something that we don't like, but also like a way for us to discover like who we are and like kind of dig deeper into that. And switching into print form, especially the kind of like quality print of like silk screen and stuff like that, it has the potential to evoke sentiment a lot more than kind of like online blog would. So I think switching to this medium has really like opened a lot of new doors for both expressing ourselves and to kind of like connect with like a different kind of readership in a different kind of way.
Yeah, that's great. And also, I'm just wondering that maybe you will be keep going on to work on this topic, nostalgia in periphery, maybe in your next project. Is there any idea like that, or this is the only one? So you just work on this topic and then you will be working on another kind of topics for your future project.
And over again about that's something that's critical about nostalgia. It's that it risking, oh, I remember that zine we did, like let's do another one. I wouldn't want to recreate the sense of nostalgia that I'm critical about, like constantly digging into that. But I would like to definitely work with the medium.
Saying it was already kind of like a on Mangal Media, this is also already a theme that there just seems to be a lot of nostalgia among us. So this was just like an overarching theme in Mangal Media, I feel like. So I don't know if it would be like a series, but this is an ongoing thing, is my impression of it.
Yeah, right. For example, you were using several certain images from 90s, like that Tipi Tip character, one of old Turkish chewing gum brands called Tipi Tip. It was a really nice character that I really like. And you were using one of image like that. But actually, this kind of images are tricky when you bring your publication or zines to outside, like Europe or United States, because they don't know about the background of this image. Yeah, I know. Maybe you have several different kind of images than Tipi Tip. Yeah, it's a really nice one. Thank you, Adnan. And would you like to talk about these images? Is there some other images that everybody can understand, even from Australia, for example?
I mean, this is the thing. Like, I want to use images that not everyone knows about, because like I want to leave a mark. Like, I don't want to just kind of like grab the images that everyone knows about. Like, I love the Ninja Turtles, you know, like I would have loved to kind of like write something about the Ninja Turtles as well. That's something that everyone knows about. But like, I want to reclaim what is mine, you know, like I want to like, okay, like there's a lot to be said in favor of like going with the stream, but I also want the thing that I remember to, because it's almost kind of like those of us who have been forgotten in this like popular culture. We want to take a moment and say, do you know what, like I've spent the 90s and the early noughts and the 80s like listening to the same music, like watching the same movies, reading the same comic books. Like how do you feel? What's happening around your part of the world? I want to listen to what they've got to say, and I want to share what I have with them. And that's the spirit in which we do this collaboration. Otherwise, this is not just about like going remember when, like the good old days. It's a political act.
Yeah, thank you, Efe. Adnan, I have a question. What's the old images that you remember from your childhood, and the images gave you so much effect? Maybe you can talk about that kind of images too, from your perspective, from Bosnian background. Maybe you can talk through images and nostalgia.
Absolutely, yeah. So Zeynep was saying that we wanted to deal with images that meant something to us, or still mean something to us. You know, what comes to mind what comes to mind in this bodily fashion, like when your body kind of reacts to something rather than just a memory. So it's more than a memory. It's a physical reaction almost. So I assume that, you know, so I'm going to show this again. So I assume when FS sees this that his mouth waters or something like that. So
Yeah, me too. When I see Tipi Tip, I'm just like,
yeah, and so in my case, so it looks like this. The thing is that so what I'm reclaiming here is, or what I'm going back to are these images from the comic books that I used to read as a child. And what we have in this comic book is those who will know the characters, they will recognize them because they are very clear in like all tropes, like all famous characters, you know, they have a couple of significant features which you recognize them by. But so here you'll see that it's my face on these characters, for instance. So here and here we have these famous characters which most Bosnians would recognize, but also Italians and a lot of people are, you know, in Europe generally and wherever those were sold. So I very much wanted to go to those, but I also have some some characters like from Marvel Comics. So it is. So there you have this combination of the local and the global popular culture, for instance, where it's and those images usually come back to me, and I always refer back to them. And a lot of times, even in my academic work, I tend to use them to explain things. So they are like go-to images that are really useful, and they explain a little bit who I am, but I also use them to explain some present moment. So what I'll say is there's another element here which I think is something you may want to emphasize when you asked, do we want to produce more of these zines, or what is next, and so on. The thing with this one is that it kind of showcases this nostalgia for the material culture. As if I said, this was silk screen, and of course these old comic books were not silk screen. This is really fancy, and this poster is really fancy. This is fancy art. This is amazing art.
High art, you know.
Yes, but they used to be pulp, you know. They used to be kind of trashy, they're like insignificant, like they are just you know, you would use them to I don't know, you know, my mother could perhaps use my comic books to light a fire, you know. It's too cold, you know, but this is not something you burn, and it actually, this kind of material production that Efe and everyone else did in this project is like, you don't want to burn this, you know, you want to save it. This is a collector's item, you know, which shows through this materiality how much this means to us, how significant it is, and how we kind of transfer it in our digital platform.
It's like an effigy, I said, that's it.
Yes, indeed. It's not just the image, not just the images in terms of content, but the image of the kind of material stuff that it was. So Efe remembers that this chewing gum, you know, it's a small piece of paper with a kind of comic strip on it, and I remember, you know, these like, you know, this cheap pulp, really bad print. And so that's also something that is a part of this nostalgia. Not only the images itself, not only the content, not only the form, but everything about it.
You know, this did not used to be high quality stuff, but in our memories we elevate it, and we do it also physically. And I like this transference between how, like, we put these like images or notions or objects on these sort of pedestals, and then I think we kind of made it physical with this through this you know, zine project as well. That's what happened there. That's what I feel like. It's a kind of elevation, but there it is a little bit cynical. I do feel like in the sense of your work and mine, I feel like there's quite a lot of tongue-in-cheek. So
there are several artists and writers in this nostalgia in Periphery project. So when people wants to get these publications and prints, they, as I understand, they are just getting that set with that prints and zines and some comics. So Efe, would you like to give more information about technically, I mean, how many artists are part of this project and what kind of prints you made? Yeah, I heard Rizzo that you printed, and also was there any other print?
There was no Rizzo. It was it's two A3 silk screens, one kind of like A5 silk screen comic book, so 3 silk screens, one digital print with a story at the back tied together with paper clips, and a single sheet of A4 that's kind of like photocopy.
Yeah, sounds great.
That one is Ayşegül's one. That's the A4. One of the most interesting things about this, that like if it wasn't for our printer, Ayşegül's kind of like daring approach. Like I would have just said like, why don't we just have like 5 A3s with like one side picture and one side writing? But she was like, no, like like each work here is going to be different than the other one. Like people should just like do whatever they want, and that's kind of what made it a bizarre collection of like different types of prints. And that's kind of like what I like about. That's kind of like what's cool about like collaborating with people who have different approaches. There's like Sharanya, for example, who is kind of like an accomplished food writer, and she wrote a personal essay about her eating disorder. That's the one that's kind of like the digital print with the paper clip. And Ayşegül wrote a story about the Haydarpaşa train station in Kadıköy, which Adnan just showed like the picture of. And but yeah, except for Ayşegül, who never wrote for the website, like everybody else, Adnan, Zeynep, me, of course, and Sharanya, we had all like written for the website before.
Yeah, great. Yeah, also Mangal Media is one of the exhibitors in Fanzineist Vienna Art and Zine Fair Online Edition 2022. And if you want to get more information about Mangal Media, you can just visit fanzineist.com, and in exhibitors section, you can find Mangal Media page, and then you can also go to Mangal Media's web shop, and you can directly buy their productions on their web shop. So Adnan or Zeynep, would you like to add anything else about nostalgia in Periphery?
No, I think I've said my piece. But it's always really nice to also just listen to Efe and Adnan. Like you agree, it's kind of like the similar thing to you, but everybody is like approaching it differently, and I think that's the point. It's a really great thing to share, and I was like really happy to be a part of this. Still am. Yeah, and I think I was just thinking like Efe, he was a curator for one time, and he did not like it.
Really? Why? Efe, what was the purpose?
The show was a disaster.
It was not good, and I was just thinking you did the same thing here, but it's like printed material, and it's like more like publishing, and I was just thinking about the difference in that. Like you liked this a lot, and it turned out great, and there was like really good communication in general, like lots more collaboration like you hoped for, so from what I see.
Thank you. Like I really enjoyed it.
But Efe, result really looks nice. I mean, you should be happy with it. I hope you don't feel that kind of feelings anymore.
I'm also really pleased that everyone who was involved in the project were like super happy with like what they like. Adnan, for example, he has like an unbox show, and he's kind of like a child opening a Christmas present. It was like really wonderful to see that.
I can imagine. And Adnan, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was really. Actually, my kids made fun of me. I said, "Dad, what are you doing? You're making." Basically, I just took a phone and say, "I'm going to unwrap this in front of everyone and just be silly and
unboxing
this this toy, So my kids were obviously laughing, but they kind of used to me being like that, because as I said, it's a bodily reaction to something like this. But what I just want to say was that this at first I thought that we were having. Or we were going to have more like tiering, and that we would have like a lot of meetings to pull this together, and all that. But we only had like one meeting. We chatted a little bit. Everyone, in a sense, was on board. Everyone knew what was supposed to be done, and just kind of went with our imagination. We were on the same page from the beginning without having to talk too much, and steer things up and all that. And it turned out this beautiful. So that's just again the testimony to the fact that the core of this project was was very clear, that it was very firm, that it was sound, and the design was there from the beginning. So.
Efe, I also wondering about your next project. There will be any collaborative project like Nostalgia in Periphery project in the future as Mangal Media?
Oh, we've got a few projects lined up. One of them is I've got another short story that I wrote, and I'm collaborating with Art Al Hassoun, who is the painter who did another previous book called Guide to Every City. We had collaborated before, and we're going to collaborate again on this. And then following that, we're going. So we want to have like speculative fiction writers from, again, the peripheral region to be able to come, because like when we think science fiction or fantasy, like a lot of the times they're kind of involved in the similar kinds of settings that we were talking about earlier, like from geographies of the world that consider themselves the core, like Europe and the United States or whatever. So we want to write speculative fiction, like fantasy or sci-fi, that comes from either the Middle East or like Southeast Asia or places like that, and think about like what would science fiction and fantasy look like how can we like imagine ourselves going into space as opposed to a bunch of white people. So speculative fiction is one of our like upcoming goals. We want to have like a series of short stories, again illustrated most likely. I want to publish at least 2 or 3 short stories in speculative fiction next year also. Inshallah.
Inshallah, mashallah. Yeah, sounds really great. I'm looking forward to see new works from Mangal Media. And yeah, thank you very much for this conversation. If you want to add some last sentences.
What about you guys? Are you planning to have this in real life next year?
We are planning to do one of digital events. Let's say half digital, half physical, but we really need to keep going on with our digital version because this is what we need for this era. Otherwise, we cannot reach the people who are from New Zealand or Japan. So it's a really nice way as an approach. So as much as possible, we will be using the digital platforms and keep going on to make some videos and creating some podcasts, and also keep going on to make some virtual exhibitions like what we do nowadays. But also, yeah, we really miss to make some physical events. Our last physical events was in 2019 in Vienna, and we were in one of old train stations. It was really huge as a space, and there was 45 different artists and publishers, and it was really a big fun.
Hopefully next year again.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. We will be working on it.
I hope nobody comes waving a gun around.
Yeah.
No, he showed his bullets afterwards.
Yeah, it was like, I will shoot you.
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, that guy was interesting.
It was like 12.
I didn't understand from what spectrum of the politics they're from. Like, are they left or right, or?
They were just teenagers, I think.
I think, yeah, they were just teenagers. That's it.
I'm also wondering how they go to, like, are they your friends?
No. Actually, I got an email from Zoom. They just said that if you just share, if you keep going on to share your links on Twitter or on somewhere else, people can directly see your live broadcast and your conversation. They can try to hack your conversation. I think this is what it happened there. They are not my friends, no. Yeah, I have some different type of friends.
Maybe they're randos, because at some point I was kind of paranoid about whether they are stalkers of Mangal Media, because we upset people who wave red flags.
I think they were like maybe Deniz, like not friends but acquaintances, like anarchists, like a new thing that young people do.
Yeah. Mm.
And 20 years later, this will be their nostalgia.
No shitty.
And maybe they will be working on a project like you. And they will be saying that, hey, in our old times, we were just going to somebody else's Zoom conversation and we were trying to hack them. It was old nice times.
We learned something that day.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much
That's a
giving
good
your
way to-
time.
Thank you, Deniz. Yeah.
It was really nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care, Paul.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Bye. Have a nice night.
Have a nice.
Yeah.
Ciao.